pentagram dedicated to Henry Foreman. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth.
Well, my friends, welcome to Agitators Anonymous. I'm Alan Averill, your hostess with, well, that is up for you to decide. Thank you for the positive comments about the Gathering Wilderness being 20 years old. Well, I'm not sure if it was a positive general consensus about the passing of time. There ain't much you can do to stop that, my friends. None of us get out of here alive. But thank you anyway for the kind comments relating to what the album meant or didn't mean, as the case may be. Today I'm going to talk about the music industry and a couple of strange goings on. So let's get into it. Without further ado. Is it adieu or ado? Either way, it doesn't really sound right when you say it out loud. Without further ado. Anyway, maybe I should have thought about that. Or I should think about that on my own time. The Ramblings of a Madman, my friends, episode 240 something. Let's get into it. How AI is going to change copyright law. So before we get into the episode, as ever, the podcast is sponsored by Metal Blade Records, the home of Primordial. So you can go to www.metalblade.indiemerch.com, INDIE, metalblade.indiemerch.com, and you can use the code AA2024, and then you type 10% off, and you can get 10% off your order. It is the home of Show No Mercy, Hell Awaits, Cannibal Corpse, Fate's Warning, Merciful Fate, Primordial, tons and tons of bands, Sirith Ungol. The list is endless. Times are tough, and that 10% off can mean an awful lot. And this is the only metal label that is still independent. Right then, now back to the episode. So first of all, I'll start with a little story about a couple of songs Primordial wrote over 30 years ago, and it might illustrate where I'm going to head with this podcast, or where I'm going to head with my thoughts on the music industry. And it won't surprise you, really. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you. But last week I got contacted to say by the people, the intermediaries, and you don't really know if you're speaking to a bot or an actual human being, over at Spotify. I've explained before that what you have to do is, as an artist, you don't have to be the artist to do this, the label has to do this as well, but you have to pay to upload onto Spotify. If you're writing a song right now and you think you can just go and upload it straight to Spotify, it ain't true, baby. You don't. You have to go through a third-party company. It's either called TuneCore or CD Baby, and you can pay you can pay an annual fee to do that, to upload lots of different albums, or you can upload them individually. It can cost $20, $30, $40 to upload each album. And the calculated risk is that, the majority of artists on Spotify have literally no listeners and will never make the amount of money back it's cost them to upload their music. That's just kind of how it works, and of course, how they make their money. But Primordial recorded a demo in 1993 called Dark Romanticism. Now, of course, this is, as it turns out, I'd forgotten I'd done this, but I'd registered these songs with IMRO, the Irish Music Resource Organisation. Back in analog times, every country has a version of this. In the USA, it's called ASCAP, I think. In Germany, it's called GEMA. I think in Norway, it's called Tono. And all of these different structures within each country theoretically should talk to each other. And if you are an artist and your songs are registered with each one of these companies, and you play a gig as an Irish person in Sweden, then theoretically the songs, you fill out your live performance sheet, and those songs have what's called a CAE number, I think, or not a UPC number, a CAE number. I'm thinking of something else there. This is the digital watermark of every song, so that it should theoretically be registered within each system and they speak to each other, and then eventually down the line you get some kind of money for that. That's the theory. So I'd forgotten that I'd registered Primordial's demo, which is 1993 with this company. But I got a message from Spotify and it said, these 4, 5, 6 songs have been claimed. I thought to myself, claimed? Claimed for what and by whom? And as it turned out, a company. Now, well, I'll say, a company has claimed them. Now, whether it's a bot, which is scouring YouTube or scouring online for unpublished works and is just claiming them in the hope that you can just, if you claim X amount of unpublished works by bands and they don't chase it up, it has a small little, profit for the plays. So this is a major record label, by the way, or a major record, I suppose, conglomerate, multinational. I'm not going to say which one, as it turns out, but Spotify then messaged me and say, these 6 songs are under, there's a dispute going on. Prove to us that you own them. By the way, though, we can't reveal who's trying to claim your songs. Incredible, really, when you think about it. Actually, it's kind of like, you've heard me talk about the Irish hate speech laws before, which say, the proof is now upon, they used to say innocent till proven guilty, but now it's kind of like guilty till proven innocent. It's maybe an example that's going to irritate some people, but look into that. I'm not going to get sidetracked and start going off on one about hate speech laws, Mr. Orwell. But basically, someone has tried to claim these old songs. Now, quite why? Because the streams are so low for our demo, that there's not really any money in it. So therefore, I could assume it's a bot scouring, as I said, the internet, looking for unpublished works, or at least not registered with these major labels. And so I get contacted and it says, these tracks are in dispute. So I'm thinking to myself, because I'm a bit annoyed, a bit pissed off, I'm not taking my own stoic advice and sitting and thinking about it, meditating on it for a moment and thinking to myself, oh yeah, of course, they're registered with IMRO. All I need to do is send screen grabs of each individual song from the IMRO catalogue and go, here you go, Mr. TuneCore or Mr. Spotify or Mrs. Spotify or whoever it was I was talking to. I presume it's a bot. Instead, I took a photograph of the original demo with the inlay, with the cassette, which included my name, my address, everything. And I said, look, this demo was made in 1993. There's no contracts. There's no documents. There's nothing. I can't provide anything from back in the day to prove that I own this. But you can see this is my name. This is my address. This is clearly the band. To the response is, yeah, this won't really do. This is not really proof at all. Obviously, in legal terms, if you were to stand in a court of law and present this cassette as admissible in evidence, I think everybody would go, oh yeah, okay, well, obviously, that's you. Obviously, that's you. But it won't do. But also during this entire process, the person, as I said, or bot I was dealing with, wouldn't reveal who was trying to claim our songs. Isn't that incredible? Someone can just anonymously try and claim your songs. Now, of course, if you've been listening to me complain about the music industry for the last 200 odd episodes, and thank you for your continued suffering, they were able to claim these things anonymously. Now, when I sent the screen grabs of obviously the IMRO registered songs, the person I was dealing with was like, yeah, this is a bit more like it, but is there anything more? Is there any more contractual? And I thought to myself, I don't really know what else I can provide for you. This is the actual screen grabs of the songs, complete with their digital registration number from the Irish Music Rights Organisation. My feeling was this person hadn't really dealt with many cases through IMRO or to do with IMRO, and sort of was sceptical about the validity of maybe you're from a country that has an unfashionable passport, and every now and again you hand your passport to somebody when you're travelling and they look at it and go, haha, yeah, that's not a real country, is it? Really? I've never heard of Malta before, as happened to my friend from Australia who's part Maltese, handed over his Maltese passport and they kind of went, haha, yeah, right, you're not getting into Eastern Europe. Kind of felt a little bit like that. Now, I'm still waiting for the outcome of this discussion, but there you go. I thought that might be an interesting preamble preface to where we're going with this, because last week a collection of artists released a silent album in protest at where AI is going to go using their work creatively. Now, if you've been listening to me talk about AI on the podcast, you know that it's basically, how can we say, it's learning from all of the things that are out there. And so if you are, I'm looking at a picture of Kate Bush now online. I'm going to go through the report. I'm going to go through the statement. Then I'm going to go through also a very interesting, I'm going to consider the different standpoints here of the different governmental bodies. So what the UK government was trying to do was to remove the sort of barrier to copyright for AI. So AI companies have to train models and they have to use copyrighted work. So if you are sitting out there and you want to use, let's say for argument's sake, I'm looking at Kate Bush here, you want to train your music exactly on Kate Bush, but you can't really put in the name Kate Bush into the AI training model because that will come up as a copyrighted name, I would imagine. So what the UK government, and I think, let's be honest, all governments are trying to do is to remove this barrier, basically to take away creative consent. So of course, bear in mind, I'm just an idiot trying to comment on these things, and I might have got the wrong end of the stick with a few of this stuff. But what it is that the AI has to train its models, and it will have to train its models on copyrighted work. So if you are using, theoretically, an AI model to create music, can you put directly bands' names into that and go, look, I really want a middle eight like Radiohead and whatever. And so people like, the list of people who've gone and backed this, it's a curious list. Billy Ocean, members of Radiohead, Bastille, The Clash. Are any of The Clash left alive? Are they? Mystery Jets, Jamiroquai, various other people. And what they fear is that this proposed law change is really going to infringe their copyright. The government is currently consulting on proposals that would allow AI companies to use material that is available online without respecting copyright, if they're using it for text, is what I said, or data mining. So this could be technically disastrous for musicians, I suppose, because what it's saying is that people will, I suppose in theory it's like being able to do a cover of a band but never have to pay them any royalties for that, or copyright royalties. If you own a tribute to Iron Maiden or a tribute to Slayer record, in theory, eventually, let's say there was 2 Judas Priest tributes in the 90s that were really, really excellent, released on Century Media. Somewhere down the line, some money should be going to the songwriters of those songs. Halford, Downing, Tipton. It should find its way eventually through copyright law, that they will get some songwriting royalties. But you see, the problem here is that for the labels, they think this is, when you sign a contract with a label, it does state that you are allowing the label to exploit this recorded version of the songs however they see fit. Some of it has incredible things. I remember signing contracts that said the known universe, and the universe, as if, some other planet was going to be discovered and they were going to be like, day 2 or day 3. Listen, that Primordial band, we've been hearing some stuff about them and we need it now. Not really. But I kind of fail to see how this AI doesn't really, it's a kind of grey area. Does this somehow, are old contracts for old music part of this? Because obviously the labels will see this as a way possibly in the future to, print, money for whatever you say, old rope or that kind of thing, because they own these old recorded versions. But theoretically, it means that you could, in a couple of years, with the powerful enough program, just make a new Led Zeppelin album. You can see the quandary here where it could go. And bands, musicians own the intellectual copyright. They own the combination of notes, for example. and it kind of comes back to the argument earlier with, me and said major multinational label trying to steal my 17-year-old dreams from me, is that the combination of notes just happened to be mine, but the fact that the demo was never copyrighted. So there's a version of To Enter Pagan, which opens the demo, that's on Spirit the Earth the Flame. This version the recorded version belongs to the label. Although usually contracts are, this right can revert back to a musician after 20 years. Sometimes it's in perpetuity. It can be forever. Sometimes it's for 20 years. If it was 20 years, then I own now that version of To Enter Pagan. I must check that out, actually. I don't think it really matters right now anyway. Not when you're in the sort of the last chapters of your career. But there are two different versions there. So the labels are perhaps thinking, well, who knows? Perhaps this could be another windfall in years to come. And they don't want pesky artists standing in the way. And don't forget, most of the labels, the major multinationals, will probably have percentages in the AI companies, which is what they did with the streaming platforms. They kind of bought into them. Better the devil you know. And they, the rates that major labels get from these streaming platforms is very different to what they pay artists. So the idea that eventually, and there would be an AI trickle-down copyright to artists of some sort of dividend or stipend, it seems very unlikely to me, because also what you're trying to do is hold back the entire world. And this is the thing that makes me think that this Silent album is, look, yeah, okay, it's a nice kind of idea, but how is this going to work? How are you going to be able to hold back all of the versions of this to sort of pay some sort of respect to the creative? I see Imogen Heap. Imogen Heap, yeah. She had some really lovely songs a couple of years ago I used to listen to. I wonder where they are. Cat Stevens, Riz Ahmed, don't know who that is. Tori Amos, Little Earthquakes. I used to listen to that record. Hans Zimmer. Composer Max Richter. Oh, if you were Max Richter, you should be worried, because the kind of stuff that Max Richter can make, I think, can be very easily made by AI already, instrumental music, if I am not mixing up with something else. But the impact on musicians, but it could impoverish creators, they're saying, from writers to visual artists and beyond. Because don't forget, AI has to learn. It has to learn from what's out there. It's not actually making anything new. It's not actually making anything that we haven't seen before. It's an amalgamation of all that's gone before, and it's just learning from those things. And the UK is trying to change these copyright laws. Now, let's be realistic. Why are they trying to change these copyright laws? Because they're trying to encourage investment in AI in the UK. There's an AI arms race going on. Whether it is, you probably saw recently the Chinese coming out with this AI model that sort of undercut the US version of it. What's it called? I keep thinking of Deep State. You can tell where my brain has been this last time. But there's going to be a sort of, this is the coming economy. This is the coming economy. And I think the UK is trying to reposition itself for foreign investment in the UK, because it's possibly something to do with Brexit. Or maybe not. But everyone is going to have to realise that some of the old analog industries are going to fall by the wayside, and every country is trying to, is jockeying for position for foreign investment, or to have the greatest minds working on these things within their countries. And obviously, if you're creating a large language model, or you're creating an AI model that has to deal with music and creativity to learn from, you don't want this copyright standing in your way of your programming. And so it's like a sort of analog, the old analog artistic culture. Its first battle was with dealing with the concept of streaming, and the idea that, when you buy a record, I'm looking at, for some reason I've been talking about the Jesus and Mary chain this morning, and in front of me is a 5 CD box set of the Jesus and Mary chain original album series. I've been debating which one to play. I'm drawn to the word Darklands more than the word Psycho Candy, I must admit. But I've been debating which one to play, and I thought podcast first, Jesus and Mary Chain second. But the point is, it's a physical product. It's in my hand. I own this. I own this box set. Whereas, of course, streaming, meant that all you were doing was streaming a song from a server somewhere. No one owned anything. So this really challenged the music industry. The challenge of AI is, I don't really know quite where everyone thinks they sit, because it's going to be very, very difficult. So, let's just think about this for a moment. The message from the musicians involved in this, connected to this silent album, is, quote unquote, the British government must not legalise music theft to benefit AI companies. A noble sentence, and one which I agree with, but I just don't see how they can dam this this river as it begins to flood over, burst its banks and flood over the sort of creative future. The UK government's proposal aims to curb the worries of rights holders expressing concerns about their work used in training AI models, and those of AI developers facing issues in navigating the UK's copyright law. I'm looking at an article here called "How Does the UK's AI Copyright Proposal Affect Artists?" Just as a sort of a little guide to what's going on. World-leading AI models by the UK in fostering greater transparency. Yeah, I mean, look, I've heard all these kind of things before, and my view of these systems of, power and governance, whether it comes to governmental institutions or, this, you've heard me criticize Spotify openly before in the podcast. They're not going to be transparent to the artists. I mean, it's just paying lip service to the moral concept. So what they're saying is that the original copyright law that exists in the UK, it requires licenses for AI companies to train their models on copyrighted works. And what they're basically trying to do is to remove that, so there aren't any licenses anymore. Which is, let's be honest, to encourage investment and encourage people to stay working here and not disappear off to the Middle East or, wherever to try and continue their work. This would mean that these new AI companies for training purposes would basically circumvent the previous copyright rules. And I think that probably the UK is just trying to fall in line with the rest of the EU, and I presume Ireland and wherever else, not that it really makes a difference, but this is the way it's going, and I just don't think that there's enough power. I think artists have never really had enough power. There's no kind of particular union that exists for creatives to kind of take on the institutions and say, try and get proper remuneration from them. I mean, governments never moved on, streaming equity or anything like that. They just not interested, I think, and they just never had the heart to try and take on Spotify. And of course, because it would require 15, 20, 30 people moving, or 30 governments all moving in tandem to try and take on Spotify and fight for a more equitable financial remuneration for artists. And I just don't think it was ever on the cards for governments to really care that much about this. So I just can't see how they're going to put their finger in the, hole below the waterline and stop the ship from flooding, so to speak. That's another kind of ocean-going metaphor. Maybe Freud is trying to tell me something. So what the government are trying to do is then to put an opt-out clause, a machine-readable reservation of rights, which would automatically indicate copyright restrictions to AI systems. This proposal signalled part of the country's broader, I'm reading here now, AI strategy termed the AI Opportunities Action Plan. Okay, got to worry about words like action plan, which detailed investments like dedicated AI growth zones for infrastructure development and funds worth 14 billion euros for this purpose. A billion here, a billion there, who knows? We know how much these numbers don't seem to matter anymore. They sharply contrasted with the former British government's cautious approach toward AI, which focused on tackling its risks. Well, you see, I mean, look, they just don't want anything standing in the way of investment in this, the future AI that's, it's here already, let's be honest. The Financial Times fears, quote unquote, widespread theft of copyrighted material without remuneration. It's very hard to prove. I mean, can you imagine the amount, once these things go public, the amount of litigation that could technically take place and not take place. I find it really, I don't know how they're going to prove these things. How can they prove unless they have some sort of access to your individual inputs into these systems? I mean, are they going to say to somebody who has whatever the app or the platform is that it's going to be, that people are going to use for creating music, you inputted the words Kate Bush, and this song obviously has an influence of that. I still don't think they're quite sure as to what it's going to entail either. I'm going to try and stick to music, or my analog, old-fashioned understanding of music, to try and make sense of this article. Artists have also pointed out flaws like unawareness about which companies are trying to mine their content within the system. I mean, yeah, there's going to be so many systems, so many people doing this at any one time. I kind of fail to see how they can keep a handle on who is doing what and where and why and how is it remunerated. I mean, these things should have been already on the table 3 or 4 or 5 years ago in relation to creativity and art. And I have to say that, I mean, this is something else entirely, but in the broader concept of the way the world is right now, the constant political catastrophe and catastrophization of everything, artists, properly paying artists for their creative work doesn't seem very high on the sort of political, emotional, everyday agenda of people. And while everybody is struggling, whether it's with the cost of living crisis or dealing with the constant barrage of war here, war there, the mind-deranging, mind-altering, mind-bending idea of opening up your small, opening up the phone right now, it's sitting in front of me, and just being bombarded with more Trump news to send you crazy, or, just this constant stream of bad news, which is a completely different podcast altogether. Why people would really care about, especially some of the names of some of the artists who are backing this, which I completely understand as an artist, but they're not exactly struggling artists, some of them. They're people who've made their money in the past. They've made their money being older. How is it going to change things for smaller bands? I don't know. Maybe they master a way of using it for promotion. I don't know. It's very complicated. But I just don't see the concerns of artists being very high on the agenda as we face into the next decade, which is going to be all of us having to come to terms with AI. Meanwhile, artists have called upon stakeholders to block AI models from infringing upon and devaluing the rights of human artists. I mean, and again, a noble sentence. I just don't imagine it's actually going to happen. I'm not going to get into like TV and movie, but you've already probably seen a couple of those trailers for different movies that are completely generated by AI. I mean, at some stage in the future, you're going to be able to make your own movies with your own characters, or with you as the main character, and just type in the story, and it's just going to be able to generate you an entire movie in the next couple of years. I don't know if you say to them, well, I'd really like a touch of Scorsese in my homemade movie with me as the central character. Are you going to have to somehow pay some sort of deference to, or, financial remuneration to Scorsese? Because, of course, don't forget there are, I'm sure if you ask Quentin Tarantino, there were filmmakers from the past that influenced him, but you don't pay a royalty for influence. So this is the kind of the thing that it gets complicated for me, is that I could pick up the guitar to my left now and write a riff that sounds like the Ramones or Misfits. But that's me being influenced by the Misfits. I don't think I owe the Misfits anything other than a doff of the cap to say, well, you can hear this riff is influenced by the Misfits. But if you're using an AI model to write a song, you're not actually picking up the guitar and you type in the word the Misfits. That's the sort of moral quandary. I'm not sure where we really stand then, because you're just typing in a word into the descriptive, into the description box or whatever you want to call it, that it will exist. If some of you have used Canva, I'm kind of made some awful kind of artworks, and with the platform Canva, which is for making art, and I would put in, I want an Edgar Allan Poe-esque this and a sunset and blah blah blah, and they're pretty awful. But a friend of mine made some incredible artwork with it. He really put some attention and detail into tiny little things. But again, it was typing. He never actually, of course, you're instructing, you're not creating. So if you're instructing through AI, you're going to have to type those words. I want a middle eight that's influenced by Radiohead, and I want an intro that sounds like Crowded House. I mean, I don't know why you'd want that, but you could want that without ever picking up the guitar. So how do we determine that level of influence? This is one of the things that kind of fries my brain a bit when I talk about it. But now something interesting. Minimum compensation requirements. I mean, look, yada, 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 not going to happen. And specific details of intended use before releasing a sound recording using a digital replication of an artist's voice. I meant to do something about this before, but I read that Bon Jovi signed a new deal with his label to release future albums with a replication of his old voice. Obviously, he can't sing anymore. I don't know if you've ever seen some footage, or I think there's a documentary, and he's clearly lost his voice. But what does this mean? Does this mean that they can use AI to write a Bon Jovi album that sounds like 1988 and make an approximation of his voice to sing over it and use it and release a new Bon Jovi album, theoretically? Theoretically, you could do that. And if Bon Jovi has given the rights over via his label to do that, I suppose it's the difference between can his label give permission to do that without his consent? Because that's the big problem. And we return back to where we started off, or at the beginning of the podcast here, was that, of course, the intellectual copyright of which belongs to you as an artist, and the recorded copyright of a song belongs to the label. So who are you actually taking? Who is AI training its learning on? That's a very complicated question. So if somebody wants to make a song that sounds like Primordial and take my voice, that's my voice. Intellectually, the sound of it, I suppose, belongs to me. But if they've trained it on a particular song and they say, I want the inflection and the specific sound of Burning Season, bring the women and children to me, blah, 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 blah. Is that then trained on the models that belong to the copyright of the label that are online? You can see the minefield here. And I think that this particular minefield is something that the AI companies and the governments who just want investment just want to circumvent at all costs, because it's going to be an irritation for them, you know. In defense of that, the different labels seem to be going different ways, but who's this now? Here's a quote. Music will be more interactive and more responsive, and that musicians will find incredible uses for AI systems we can't predict today. Well, we can't really predict exactly anything of where it goes. We also can't predict that you're going to be paid for your creativity. But my hint, my clue, my sense would be that what this attempt to remove or alter the UK's copyright law is about is to encourage investment into the UK for AI models, or, you know, people working on them, and that the copyright law is an irritation, it's an annoyance, and will just get moved aside because the lobby of artists isn't strong enough to stand in its way. And also, how would you police this? The whole world is going to change in relation to these things. And are the wishes of some, 60-year-old artist, who are they going to be really taken into concern, or any artist? I just fail to see. Of course, it's my fatalistic, it's my nihilistic, it's my negative view of our relationship to power and influence and finance, which of course leaves us, at the bottom of the structure. I can't see how the rights of creative people are going to be protected and respected in this coming transformation. But that's why the podcast is called Agitators Anonymous. If I was going to sit here and say, I think it's all going to be okay, none of you would be listening, would you? Anyway, my friends, Agitators Anonymous. It's a complicated one, isn't it? Over and out.